Well, the wood forest products industries, they were learning how to make hemp out of vegetable matter at the time. They were learning to make paper out of vegetable matter at the time. And then
William Randolph Hearst had, because of his newspapers, he owned a lot of forests?
Oh, he was certainly a member of the coalition, but there are many others involved. And it was the pharmaceutical industry, the coming up with chemicals rather than plant-based things. It was the chemical factories and this and that they understood that hemp feedstocks would be a necessary competitor. But it was really the plastics industry. When they figured out in 1935 how to make telephone-grade plastics out of industrial hemp, this stuff had to go. And everybody now points to that development as the one that really pushed them over the edge. DuPont and company had just spent the family fortune on buying German patents for nylon and rayon and setting up huge factories in the United States, and the natural fibers were under attack.
So the cloth aspect of hemp was threatened by, DuPont was threatened by that.
And not just the cloth aspect of it, but the fact that you had this veritable mill of cellulose in the hemp plant that you could take natural fibers and compete with what they were trying to do chemically was competition for them.
Well, Don, in modern day times, there's been a lot of consciousness raised by people like John Cougar Mellencamp and Willie Nelson about the plight of the farmers. And in my home state, Kentucky, there's a hell of a lot of poor farmers out there, and from one year to the next, they're worried to death about what's happening with the tobacco crop. And it sounds to me like there's potentially a real asset, a real gold mine in a sense, in being able for the farmers to freely raise hemp. This seems like a very political issue, to me, and it's something you've been involved with, haven't you?
Yeah, it's kind of what we're hearing down at this conference in the last few days. Is these politicians learned 20-some years ago that they had to jump up and down about drugs to get elected, and they're still on that model. They haven't learned that they have to jump up and down sensibly now about drugs to stay elected. Mm-hmm. And there's a tremendous lack of education amongst our congressmen and senators about where the world has changed in the 20 or 30 years since they were elected to these offices.
Well, where are we right now in terms of the fight for the legalization and the freedom of American farmers to grow hemp?
We're on the home plate just trying to get a hit. We are just at the beginning of trying to score anything here. We are
this is an absolute total suppression of hemp. What do the American farmer associations say about this? Isn't there an economic incentive in they're becoming the recipients of the fruition of this wonderful plant?
I think they're looking to Canada to see if the Canadian farmers make it with hemp.
I see.
But so anywhere that gets Canadian radio, all the farm bureaus in the northern United States, they've all come up with good hemp resolutions and gotten things passed through their state legislatures. The fact that North Dakota and Montana and Idaho and all these northern states, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, all have hemp legislation is simply that these farmers up there are listening to what's going on in Canada and understand that there are farmers up there that are doing very well with this crop.
Is this the same as with medical marijuana, where there's state initiatives where they made a certain amount of progress, but the federal government simply overrides the whole thing, so it's just something on paper where they really don't have shit?
Well, our biggest problem with the hemp industry is these continuing threats from the U.S. government. It's not like the government has to really even shut us down. Every once in a while they'll seize a load of the stuff and put out publicity about it, or they have this agenda item on the Drug Enforcement Administration's agenda that they want to create this new law to keep hemp out of foods, and that should be the Food and Drug Administration's jurisdiction and all that. But just by the government putting out such, premature, negative stuff, it really keeps hemp from taking off as a product. So they're trying to, shoot us down before we even get started. But hemp is now in every health food store. It's going to be in every supermarket. It's going to be in your hardware stores. You're going to see a lot more hemp, and I hope people will take the time to learn about it and study it and use these products and understand this is not the evil weed, but a useful plant that everybody needs. I thank you for the interview.
Thank you. Okay, and we'll let Don go. He has an important lecture to get to, and hopefully we'll be seeing you soon.
All substances that have a high potential for abuse. Well, is recreational use of marijuana abuse? No. Well, then why is it controlled? Right? Well, because it's a police state.
Illegal use now constitutes abuse.
It's not a police state, right? The federal government may be beyond redemption. We may have to win this in all 50 states before the feds ever get around to bringing themselves 1 inch closer to the truth. But the federal controls over these substances are mirrored in every state. And each state has separate laws on this stuff, and those laws can be changed. And not only can they be changed by citizen initiatives or by legislatures, in general, the same way that at the federal level, they delegate the authority to the Attorney General, the Surgeon General, the Drug Enforcement Administration, to decide which things go on these lists in the states. This is also delegated to an administrative agency, and it's generally the well-known agency, the Board of Pharmacy. Right? And this is 5 or 6 or 10 pharmacists who sit around and meet, a couple of times a year and decide which pharmacists should be allowed to have licenses and who's prescribing too much of the wrong things and should get their license yanked. Well, these guys also have the job of deciding which substances meet the criteria. And of course, they'll take proposals. I have read the laws in various states, not all of them, but maybe only half a dozen. They'll take proposals in general from anybody to re-examine whether something should be on the list. And of course, whenever the feds decide that something is dangerous and ripe for abuse, like MDMA, they'll go down and recommend that all the states do the same thing. But you would think among the 50 states, there ought to be 5 or 10 at least where there are honest citizens, doctors, pharmacists, etc., sitting on these boards who could actually take a semi-objective look at the criteria and say, these kids going out and dancing all night on this, is that abuse? These people who smoke marijuana to remedy their medical conditions or just because they like the results, is that abuse? Maybe these substances don't belong on here. And I think we should all go back to our own locations and start making those cases, because it's only a police state to the extent that you let them run it. If you go up and challenge the lies, then at least they have to lie in front of the public. They, instead of just quietly passing this stuff in a back room somewhere, they have to, it'll be on the record that 10 people came in and said, here's the truth, here's the citations, here's the scientific literature, here's the sociological results. Oh, and you did the wrong thing anyway? Okay, at the federal level they can get away with it. On the state and local levels, there's too much community pressure for people to continue to defy the will of the community and the truth. So I think that if we stop lying about this stuff, that we can make a big impact. And the other thing is, this is a big political issue. This is a debate. Most of the public, beyond the 80 million who've tried the drugs themselves, they don't know which side is right. Right? How can they judge which side to follow? Well, one of the things I discovered both in encryption and censorship issues on the internet was, if it turns out